Hey guys, a next book review here is The Castle by Franz Kafka, um, also known as Das Schloss in the German title, because he also spoke German. So, I am going to be using some notes here, because there is some stuff that it has been almost 5 years since I've read it, this version, so hence why it looks so beaten up and covered in stains and all that. But yeah, it was originally published after his death in 1924, and um, that's like a lot of his stuff. Like a lot of his stuff, he actually published after he passed on. So stuff like the trial, I think. The Metamorphosis, I think he did publish during his lifetime, but it was a lot of his works were actually left unpublished. This one is actually unpublished so much that it was actually mid-sentence. You can actually see in the very last chapter here. Excuse me, this one has deckled edges, or decked edges, I think. So it's kind of like, I'm not a huge fan of that as far as like the aesthetic of it. It kind of is interesting, but I never really got that, because it's like trying to find a page, right? Like you're trying to like pinpoint, like you can't really do that. I mean, it looks nice, but yeah, it like ends mid-sentence, and in the spirit of the kind of the novel. So yeah, the last sentence being, "It was difficult for her to understand, but what she said." And that's what we get. It's it's definitely a roller coaster of a thing. The main themes of it are, absurdism, totalitarianism, absurdity, and an analogy of the religious journey, being in the sense that K, the main character, who's referred to only as K, I wonder if that has to do. I've seen that before with Kafka. In the trial, there's a Joseph K, but it's not uncommon. I want to say there's another one where he just uses one syllable, or one letter rather, to kind of abbreviate the name. I wonder if this has something to do with the themes of an identity being lost in the midst of this kind of miasma of kind of a seemingly meaningless quest for answers, in the face of this, absurd, kind of regime, or, bureaucratic, endless red tape. So, yeah, there's an unwavering commitment to an ideal, in a similar way that Camus says something to the effect of in the myth of Sisyphus. He always never fails to stump me. He says being adopted by the castle in a Sisyphean quest, because he actually uses Kafka as somebody who recognizes the absurd, absurd heroes and the myth of Sisyphus. So highly recommend that too. And then there's also Kafka's own experience in real life. He's relating to real life. There was a trip he took in, I think, in 1920, and you can actually see pictures of this. This is actually really interesting, because at that time, I guess the camera, obscura wasn't, was like was being kind of used for recreational purposes well into the time, and from what I know, so it's like pretty cool to see him in the Czech castle of Spindle Mule, I think. And then there's something really interesting. I think it was actually in the preface to that book, into that version, where one of the editors or the translators is talking about Kafka, his own experience in a like this kind of bureaucratic work meeting he had to attend, and he was like almost like covering his laughter. He's covering his mouth so people wouldn't see him laughing, and that kind of, I always thought it was interesting that Kafka was the type of person that was, he was said to have been, reading aloud his stories with great passion and sincerity. Like he was like very into kind of the storytelling aspect of it. He was really into he had a sense of humor too, as morbid as it could be. And yeah. Yes. But the main themes being powerlessness in the face of an inscrutable unstoppable authority. So, the division between the reality of K in this whole entire book is trying to parse out, and then what he's being sold by the castle. And I'll get more into that. So, alright. So, the main characters are K, as I went over, simply referred to as K, Frida the barmaid, who he ends up being engaged to later, Barnabas the messenger, and the elusive Clam, who you never actually see in the book. You only get little promissories from him. You get people relaying message from Clam, but you never see the man himself. It's just like, which is, I find this hilarious. Both hilarious and like upsetting too, because it's like, why is he just like leaving Kay in the dark? Like, he's trying to do his job. All he wants to do is just get a meeting with this guy, and he can. It's just, I love that. Kind of remind me a little bit of like Dorcia in American Psycho, where he's like, oh, we're always gonna go to this great restaurant, and like Dorcia is like one of the greatest, and it's like nobody gets in there. Yeah, and it's just like, anyway, but so okay. Arthur and Jeremiah, the two comically inept messengers, who end up sharing the same bedroom as Kay and Frida, when he becomes a school janitor. More on that later on. And like I said, it's almost like Kay is almost like a ghost throughout this. He's kind of like floating. That's kind of my analogy that kind of helps me out, is that Kay is he's floating through this novel, kind of suspended in time, and he's the one, he has a clear identity, but it's almost like when the castle, in relation to the castle, it's like, this far off, untouchable thing. So, yeah. So, basically it starts out, Kay is a land surveyor, and he is contracted by a certain castle. I'm assuming, it never really says for sure, but we assume because there's using German/Czech names. A lot of these places, I think, are like modern-day Czech Republic, and maybe Poland too. So you get like kind of like a little bit of a mixture of all these different languages. So my assumption is that it's like somewhere there in that region of Czech Bohemia, and he's being contracted by this castle to survey the land, which I don't really know much more of how that job necessarily, what that would entail, but it's this mysterious castle. He is first viewed eerily from below when he sees only the outer stone sections of it on a mountainous region surrounded by an adjacent village. And this village is really interesting because basically throughout the castle, the village is like this underlying, it's like lower, so it's basically like Kay shows up the first time and he sees the castle, but only from afar, kind of like this, like I said, the kind of outer remnants of it, kind of hinting at it, and then the village is like the only place he actually gets to. It should be, I mean, if you really thought of it, if you really think about it, it should be, if you were thinking about it from strictly in a rational sense, you'd probably just rename it the village, because like that's where 99% of the novel takes place. You never see the castle, you never get to the Kay. Kay never makes it there, and yeah, but he ends up basically staying in this inn, with the inn is the Heron off to rest after a long journey. He's just, so yeah, he's Clam is one of the main authority figures of the castle, kind of the big boss type guy who Kay is supposed to be reporting to, but he never actually meets, and he's basically tells him to report to the mayor of the village, and but then the mayor says that this is miscommunication, so this is where things are like get frayed up, because he's like, so one guy's telling me this thing, Clam's telling me to go to the mayor of to meet with the mayor of the village, because that's where the mayor's telling him, and then the mayor himself is saying, no, that's not what's going on. So basically this is like not trying to like whittle this down and say that the whole entire novel is like this kind of ordeal, but like it is very much kind of a foreshadowing of things to come, because it's like very, throughout the whole entire novel there's so many of these different mishaps, these miscommunications, like a like someone he said she said, like it's almost like a game of telephone, like a very twisted, childish game of like overly convoluted telephone. Like it's just like this person said this, and then there's telephones that show up in this book too, which I love. Um, it's gonna, he's this is where Kay meets Frida and forms a relationship and ends up later on engaged, but she leaves him for inexplicable reasons later on. Could have something to do with status, maybe the fact that he never made it to the castle. There is a very, it is told through kind of a almost a clinical prose, like very simple, just like, but like a lot of Kafka's writings. But there is a lot of pretty beautiful quotes that I'll mention later on, and that show the relationship between Frida and Kay. It's just a very personal. There's a lot of love and passion there, and I think people think it's like, oh, this whole entire thing is like a very cool type of thing, which I thought too. Like I thought it was like very kind of aloof and cool and inimical and almost like what's the word, like heartless, almost dispassionate. But there's a lot of a lot of warmth in that relationship. It's like it's almost like a solitary fire between Frida and Kay for a little while before things kind of get out of hand, and it's like kind of the only semblance of like an actual genuine relationship. This is kind of me a little bit kind of adding my own 2 cents, and I don't know how valid of a excuse or a explanation that is. But yeah, so Kay is left in the dark, finds no response from Clam, and is given wildly contrasting narratives from both the village and the castle. So it's like the village is saying one thing, the villagers have like this idea of like the customs. It's like there's certain customs that the village has and that the castle has. And I think like the village is like, castle is almost like this, it's almost like this symbol of like status in society, right? It's like it's this kind of closed off, guarded, you can't go here, this is almost like an elitist place. And they, in order to kind of keep it that way, they're like, okay, well, we need to create like a crap ton of customs, crap ton of little, you have to go make people jump through so many hoops to get through this. And the villagers strike me as kind of more down to earth, but their kind of rustic ways, eccentricities are mean that they're constantly they're kind of they have their own view of what goes on in the castle. It's like, oh no, that's not what's happening. No. So I'll get more to that. So here's all the praise. Yes. Yeah, Kay soon finds out that his attempts at reaching Clam is considered taboo to the village which has its own peculiar customs. So this is another thing too. They have like certain things like, ooh, that's hush hush, like you shouldn't try to and all of them praise the ways of the castle officials, and if any contradictions are presented, they justify them through lengthy hortatory rationalizations. So Kay, yeah, there's plenty of that where you see in the novel where they're like, oh, well, the castle officials, like, they're not wrong. They just, like, you don't possibly understand that this is, like, you can't possibly understand that they are, they just have a way of doing things that you don't understand. It's like, like they'll go on and on, very moralistic, ways of kind of rationalizing them. So Kay has met with Erlinger, Clam's secretary, who only offers a brief message. So it's like it's all leading up. He's like, finally, I get to meet with Clam, and it's like, nope, just like this tiny little message. And for the most part of the novel, Kay remains in the village, and instead of working his way toward the top, where the castle lies unreachable. Wait, hold up, I lost it. He is offered an increasingly pathetic job as a job positions in the village, eventually settling as measly janitor for a school, since being demoted from his mayor-directed position as a school teacher. So Kay is led around in circles. He's never led past the village. He kind of just stays stuck there, which I find honestly pretty humorous in a way, because it's like, how many places have you seen in life where you're trying to climb some type of ladder, trying to make leeway, you think you're doing things right, but somehow you end up stuck in this rut. And this sounds kind of like a cliche, stuck in a rut, but it kind of speaks volumes if you think about it, depending on like the way on what you're referring to, like these situations where you're grasping for air, you're just like, and you think that life always has this trajectory of just, yeah, like we're given this narrative since we were young in school that if you just work hard, the trajectory of your life will just be this ever climbing, progressing thing, this arc. But most of the time, for a lot of us, maybe I'm just speaking from experience, it kind of just looks like, oh, I'm making some progress here, and then, ooh, darn, that sucks. You're just like in this abysmal low spot, and you kind of like plateau and this and that. It's not like this, like, ooh, just like simplistic, arc, like I said. So, measly. So the school is also where Frida, I think, also works with him too. This is where I'm a bit confused, because she's described as a barmaid. So he's given room at the inn, kind of on the floor, I think, because they're actually full. So it's like you get this contrasting thing, kind of subject and object type of thing, I think. I don't know if that's quite Hegelian or what, but like the idea of like the subject and the object, and it's like people's versions of what the castle's like. I've also noticed is like the village is very constrained. It's very, you expect the castle to be like this wide kind of stately, commodious place, and then like the village, every place he gets, Kay, this poor guy, can't get a break. He's just like, maybe Kafka speaking from experience, like injecting some of his own life experiences in there, in the sense that he's very, where he's put is this very confining, liminal space. Like he's always on the verge of like, am I gonna get promoted? Am I gonna go here? Am I gonna do this? And it's just like, no, it's just like nothing ever comes of it. Which is so true, like again to real life. So despite this, the castle's mouthpieces are somehow convinced that Kay is doing just fine, and are not mistaken his current trajectory. Kay is told numerous lies, like the castle being flawless in their paperwork, despite Kay being sent there on account of there being a mistake to begin with. So again, it's like this back and forth thing where it's like, wait, wasn't I sent here on account of a miscommunication? And they're like, no, it's like, that can't be true because our paperwork is flawless. It's like circular reasoning, right? It's like, it's this endless bureaucracies. This is what, so the very nefarious or insidious part of that is that the fact that you see this a lot in totalitarianism too. It's like, of course, like it's the whole entire thing is like, which brings me to kind of might as well mention before I forget, is like kind of like Mark Fisher's take on this in Capitalist Realism, which is an excellent book take on like modern late stage capitalism, and like how a lot of this, how it adds up, and how a lot of it has a lot of like kind of reflects a lot of what happened in the Soviet Union, and like a lot of these extremely ineffectual feudal wastes, just squandering everybody's time, not only just time and money, but people's lives, on these huge campaigns of just like, we need to build, for example, like he uses like the White Sea Baltic Canal of like 32, I think 1932 is when it was like started, and like they spent years on this thing. I think it was this one that they spent like dozens of years on. I could be wrong. There's another one that Schultz and Nitzen mentions, I think. I don't know if this is the same one, but yeah, either way, it's like similar thing, spending so much time, people are dying, people, the gulag, they're forced labor, they're just like dying on this thing, and then all just so a couple ships can go past, and like it's just like, oh, it's like, well, everything's perfectly fine, because if it's like the wonderful, our comrades are building this, and if our it's going towards a good cause, it has to be, because it's like the very thing itself is the promotional aspect of it. The whole entire glitz and glamour is just, it's all the campaign hyping it up, but like there's actually nothing Meanwhile, there's nothing of substance going on. It's just like, yeah, we've made this thing, but like, is it really worth it? Like, so like that's the thing. It's like all this kind of like, um, uh, I won't make a a value statement about capitalism per se, but like I've seen this in any type of ideology where it's like any time you're promoting, there's so much hard work and grunt labor into just getting something done, and like the whole entire time the teleological goal is like there is none. It's just just well it's like the war in East Asia. It's like there is no like point of it's like in 1984 is like which I'll have to review eventually, is the thing I just find compelling about that is like it's the point of the war isn't to win the war. The point is just to keep it is just to keep some type of war machine going, to keep people on their heads and to keep power. Anyway, so toward the end of the castle, Kafka gets more arcane, more and it gets harder and harder to follow. I feel like it kind of gets more, increasingly more, kind of because it starts out with like a kind of a almost a prosaic kind of fly on the wall type of Kay's arriving in the village and it's simply kind of stated, and then all these other characters like Barnabas, Messenger, and the two very comical assistants, which I have to kind of expound on a little bit more because I found them so hilarious. The fact that they just show up and they're so inept. They're like 2/3 of the Three Stooges, I think, because they don't contribute anything. They don't help Kay. They're just there. They're just like, like they're just like they total waste of time for him. Like just to send these two, totally cartoonish, you know, silly goofballs. Just like they just waste his time. They frustrate him more. They take up space, the very limited space that he already has. They're just like very funny scene, which I didn't notice till I like reread certain sections of it, where Kay wakes up in like schoolroom and like the two messengers are like flanking him and like are actually in the same bed as Kay. Like he never invited them in the bed. It's just like they're just like so what's the word, like kind of invasive of his privacy too. It's just like they're just like, oh. Anyway, so I just thought that was funny. Rumors of connections village is so there's a sliver of hope in Brunswick. So the character of Brunswick's wife shows up here, and there's a son who's rumored to have a connection to the castle. So like right now, Kay's grasping at straws. He's just like desperate to find out how can he get in leeway. How can he get any connection, a foot in the door in the castle. And he's like, this lady Brunswick's like her son could perhaps help out, and that doesn't pan out, as far as I know, because it ends the way it ends is the officials are said to have only entered the village unless they need female company, implied to be sexual. So it's like that's probably the reason why you never see Kay, is because he's so busy. He just sends out little notes, sends out his like crony, sends out all his like little inept messengers to kind of speak for him. But like I said, like they only go unless basically they just need like female company, which is implied to be sexual. So at this point, the novel ends mid-sentence, and since Kafka didn't finish it before his untimely death in 1924. Yeah, it was a very tragic what happened. The fact that he was never able to finish this. But in a sense that it's actually frustrating, but is also fitting, oddly, because Kafka, a lot of his stuff kind of, even the stuff he does, get to the very end, the trial too, with like the way that ends, it's like so like whoa, so dark, so morbid, but very very telling. I think it's very it's very appropriate that it does end that way once you know about his life more, or about what it means to be Kafkaesque, and there's also intertextuality. So like David Foster Wallace also remarks on Kafka, which is like a great part of it's a series of essays. I think it was in Consider the Lobster, and where Kafka's not actually being depressing purposefully, but it's actually comforting to the human condition, because so often we think of human life as meaningless, or like existence as meaningless, but it's with I think with Kafka is that he's actually showing that there's like a spirit to it in trying, and just trying, and that's what you see a lot in his works. So also the another thing Mark Fisher said was like how he was like comparing like the telemarketer call, the modern day telemarketers, to kind of like the way in which Kay was trying to reach. There's like early on in the novel, I think when the two assistants are, he's trying to like make a phone call, and it's just very early on, like, you know, phone call type stuff. So like the technology is very limited, but like it's very humorous in the way that I think the way he describes it is like he hears like these like hums, like these low, like, you know, white noise, buzzing noise or something on the other end, but like he never figures out what it is, and it's just like he's supposed to be getting on the phone with like some type of like bigwig from the castle, some type of, not obviously not official, because the officials are so holy, you know, they're so like they're basically gods. But you know, he's like thinking to get some type of connection, literally like a phone connection, and he gets like just like white noise, you know, it's like entirely tuned out, you know. Again, very very emblematic of the entire thing. I just thought that was kind of funny, because he compared that to you know, telemarketing, where you're just like on the phone, it's just like, yes, can you please hold this and that. It's like nothing much. If you think about it, nothing much has really changed in the past 100 years, since almost 100 years since it's published. So yeah, I want to read a few quotes, because I think, like I said a little bit earlier about there being actual pretty warm-hearted, passionate side to this novel. There's no quiet place here on earth for our love, not in the village and not anywhere else. So I picture a grave, deep and narrow, in which we embrace as if claimed together. I bury my face against you, you yours against me, and no one will ever see us. I dream of a grave deep and narrow, where we can clasp each other in our arms and with clamps, and I can hide my face in you, and you would hide your face in me, and nobody would ever see us anymore. So a lot of that, I think that's between Frida and Kay. So like it's like this love of kind of like, it's almost like a desperate struggle, like this very kind of like, let's just hide from this world, like just hide from this madness just for once, you know, and in a way that's very beautiful. So yeah, I'll end it there. Apologies for keep on looking at the notes and stuff, but that's kind of one of the first videos I actually kind of wrote out, to my great surprise. I actually made the point of writing out notes to kind of like refer to, rather than it's just me entirely winging it. But yeah, thanks for watching.